Welcome to Head Creator Radio, where Afro-Caribbean roots meet vibrant sounds.
Head Creator Radio.
Head Creator Radio.
Honourable Natty Dread. When Bob Marley died on the 11th of May 1981, I was already living up at River Clare. I was living in River Clare from 1979 to 1982. My motion to living up in the hills was a gradual process rather than a running away from home, never to be seen again. In what I found as a piece of land that used to belong to Mr. Kelly, a white man, and Imwata got his permission to work on that land. So after several months, I began to sleep overnight, weekends, and then I would disappear for longer periods of time until I just became permanently based at River Clare. Eventually, some friends I trained at Baptist State gave me use of a little shack that belonged to a brother that was overseas in Guadeloupe. So I would come down from the mountain and stay there for some time before I make my next move. So when Bob Marley died in 1981, by the end of the year, I had written a poem, Honourable Natty Dread. And actually it was a song. I was inspired to write a tribute song to Bob Marley using the song Exodus as its reference. But during the turn of 1981 into 1982, Ian Jackson, a schoolmate, whispered to me that he was working on a book of poetry. And that gave me the idea to publish some of my poems, including Honourable Natty Dread. I've been writing poems in my bedroom by Miss Maud since in the 70s, 75, 74, you know. All of them were Rastafarian inspired poems. And I decided eventually to publish a booklet of 10 poems mimicking the 10 songs on an LP. And we as youth, teenagers, we couldn't afford to buy Bob Marley's LPs. You know, most of us were unemployed, or I was unemployed. I was just going up and down the hills. When I left school in 79, 80, I began to go up in the hills. By 1981, I was fully up in the hills. And it wasn't like in today's era where you have mobile phones that are very useful for keeping in touch with society, communicating amongst friends, checking the news and things like that. We got nothing like that. And as Rastafarians, I don't know of any dread that had transistor radios up in the mountain. The idea of going in the hills was to escape Babylon and to live in harmony with Jah in Zion, wherever you found that to be. So I only found out Bob Marley died when I came down from River Clare, passed through Imwata's yard, and Water broke the news to me. And we stayed there listening to some of the radio Bob Marley was playing all over the place. And Imwata said to me he remarked about how the significance of the man, how as a dread he was being honored and played, and anyhow I decided to present Honourable Natty Dread as the title of my book of poetry. Why Honourable Natty Dread? Because the government of Jamaica had honoured Bob with the Order of Merit, OM, in Jamaica, and he was now referred to as the Honourable Robert Nesta Marley. And about a month before he died, he also accepted the Ethiopian Orthodox baptism, and he was given the baptismal name of Behani Selassie, the Light of the Trinity. So I looked at this and I decided to dedicate my book to Bob Marley in honor or on memory of his contribution to the upliftment of I and I. I also added that although my personal religious views are not overriding the content of this book, and I present my selections from my collections of poetry from 1977 to 1981. Okay. So when I decided what I was going to do, I was still in the hills, so I scooted up and down the hills. I asked Ras Albert if he could illustrate the book for me. And this is groundbreaking because books of poetry or books didn't have illustrations. People were not, local authors were not publishing books back then. The only person to have published books was Giftus John, Lennox Holy Church, Ralph Carsey, Phyllis Shadowfree, and Jean Rees. So it wasn't a notable thing for a Rasta man to say, I want to make a book of poetry. So anyhow, Ras Albert also encouraged me to put in a little bit more of the Rastafari language into the book. And I wanted to put a photograph of Bob Marley at the front. He told me, Bob Marley is dead. You are the Natty Dread. Put yourself. So I went off and I got a photograph taken at photo 1, and Ali Richards was the one that removed my photograph. And Ali cut out the photograph and placed it on the book and created a design. And when we brought the manuscript to Tropical Printers, they did the rest in terms of the cover and some of the outlining of the pages. And the interesting thing is this, that when I first went to Tropical Printers, I spoke to Mr. Monroe, who was the manager in charge of printing at the time. He told me I have to bring it back typed. So I went and I got a neighbor, girl to type the manuscript, and also another friend, Earl Edwards, who did her first typing. I think she did the final typing of it. And then I went back to him with it. But before that, I have to tell you about the funding issue, because when I got the estimate for the book, the book cost 100 copies at, I think it was $1.50 a copy. Right, so in order for us to get 150 copies, we needed $300. So I decided to look around and see how I could get that from the at first I thought of the small project assistance team, because they were former leftists, the Alliance Party, the Dominican Liberation Movement. Most of them were former members of the Movement for New Dominica, which was associated with Cabinet Defense. So I thought it would be a good idea to see if they would support my book and either fund the whole book or whatever. So I brought my manuscript to them and I told them that I'm looking for $300 to print 150 books. He told me, well, have I spoken to the Holy Church? I should go and speak to him about how he did it, what paper he used, and ink, and speak to Jesus John. And when you do that, come back and we'll talk about it. So when I came back with the information, I told him I had spoken to them out, I had looked into the matter. He told me that they preferred to give some funding to somebody who was establishing a fowl pool or a fowl cage. You know, in Dominica, people raise fowls, a cage, whatever. So they decided they were going to fund that, and my book was not accepted for funding. On the third, I decided to go to the court of division. I spoke with Orlin Bully, and he promised me $150. And I decided, let me go and speak with a schoolmate of mine who was Neva Shillingford. She was inheritor of a baking business of her father, Eric's Bakery, and she agreed to give me $150. So I had the $300 and I was able to get the 150 books printed. The book was launched May 25th, African Liberation Day at the Harlem Jam Plaza. And as you know, the Unity of Rastafari Dread was the Rastafari organization at that time. And at that time, we used to hold African Liberation Day activities in the 80s, 1981, 1982. I'm not sure when the last one was, maybe 83 or 85, because the book was launched there. The MC was Ted Daly, I remember, and I told the crowd that African Liberation Day business is everybody's business. So the book was launched there, and I also did some interviews. First, I had the interview on TBS Radio with Steinberg Henry. I was chuckled to see Steinberg and Michael Peters and Sherman Green jostling as to who would interview me, who wants to interview Ras Albert. Eventually, we settled on Steinberg. And Steinberg asked me before the interview, he asked me, so what are we going to talk about? So I told him, talk about the book, Rastafari, or whatever, this and that. And we had an interesting discussion, I remember. So one of the things I remember about that interview was he asked me, why have I used the phrase, the sun is shining and high time is up? And things like that. And as far as I understood, I was the first Rastafarian to speak or to be interviewed in my own right, not as a news item or something happening, a Rastaman talking. I also did interviews with the youth division, and at that time it was Giftus John who was the presenter of a youth division program. I went down to their offices on Bulu Road and had an interview there at their office. And whilst I was there, one of the youth officers, Ava McIntyre, she listened to me reading my poem. She said, "You need to put a little bit more expression into your reading," because I was reading Honourable Natty Dread like it's Homer, Chaucer, Shakespeare, kind of a monotonous from out of this earth, from every generation must arise a mighty prophet. This time I need to give it a little bit more expression, so that is when I upped the ante in my performance of it, and I reached a climax when many years later I was at a workshop with an American poet, and she gave me some more hints as to how to deliver my poem. Because I was noted for not using pen and paper to recite poems. I memorized the poem and I deliver it. And she'd ask me, "Where is the Natty Dread? Where is he?" So then, so in my articulation, I need to kind of, as if I was speaking to him directly, and things like that. But that leads me into the second half of 1982 when I was invited to join the Frontline Bookstore by Eddie Toole. Had just come back from the United Kingdom and he was planning to establish a Afro-Caribbean bookstore. And I must have been notified that from the Dominica Writers Guild, because I was also a very pioneer member of the Dominica Writers Guild in the early days. Ian Jackson again met me and he invited me to come to the meetings. It was very early. And I became one of the key members of the Dominica Writers Guild and the Frontline Bookstore all through its life until both of them kind of faded out in the early 2000s. But I served not only as a shareholder at Frontline Bookstore, but also as vice president and secretary on more than one occasion for the Dominica Writers Guild in the course of its life. And we also did many other projects with the Writers Guild and Frontline, the Cultural Division, and so forth. So in August, I was up in the mountain, up in River Clare, and I heard a shout. I heard some brethren calling for me, "Rastafari, Rastafari," because I was known as Rastafari Selassie because I had gotten some visions whilst I was in the hills, different kind of visions that I will talk about on another occasion. But two brethren came up to the hills, that's Ras Andre and Ras Leroy, telling me that they hear that Babylon shoots me in the hills and they come out to find out what is going on, what is all this about. And I myself was shocked. But I'm not that shocked because being in the hills, I can give you at least 4 or 5 or 6 anecdotes of my encounters with the police and with wanted dreads, because River Clare was like a Rastafarian village from the mouth where it joined the Rosal River. We had some Nomte at the bottom, Raskuai, then higher up we had Mwata, higher up we had Raspit, higher up we had Dodobala, we had us on the flat of Kelly, and there were other brethren. There was Wa higher up and Noah. So there were different types of dreads answering the various descriptions that the dread report had talked about. That some dreads are cultural activists, some dreads are naturists, whereas some dreads are criminal elements, And I think in the course of the 4 years I lived up in River Clare, I would have met all types, and I myself would have fell into one or more of these groups. One night I was in my little shambwa before I started to build a bigger house. At night, in the middle of the night, a moonlit night, a little shuffle by the little stream. And when I looked across, I saw the silhouette of a dread, completely shirtless, but he had a rifle on his back. He asked me, who am I? I told him, I'm Ras Albert from Roseau. So he spoke to me for some moments, and then he gave me some marijuana seeds, and then he moved off, disappearing down the ravine. And the next morning, I was woken up by a squad of police, maybe about 20 police, all dressed in camouflage. And so they were led by one Inspector Barnes. So Inspector Barnes asked me, who am I? Who's your mother? I told him, well, you wouldn't know who my mother is because Miss Mother told me, when they hold me, don't call her name. So I avoided calling her name. But Barney said, I know your mother. Your mother is Miss Mother. You live at Kennedy Avenue. I said, yes. So then he looked up above my little house. He saw a tray full of marijuana seedlings. He asked me, do you know how much jail he could get for that? And he just shook his head. And he walked away. And all the other officers walked away. But the last two to walk away, they grabbed all those little seedlings and just put them in a bag. And he took me off with them. We went up higher to where Mickey had his house. And after some minutes, they were burning the house. They just started to destroy the house and burn the house. And then one of the officers picked up a book called Fascinating Facts. It was my book and I borrowed it to Mickey for him to read. Actually, it was a book that I came down from England with. One of the gifts of my former schoolmates at primary school over there had given me that gift when I was coming to Dominica. And I have to recall that in 1981-82, it was just a mere less than a decade, or about 10 years since I had arrived in Dominica as a British-born West Indian. So anyhow, the officer asked me, is this your book? I told him yes. And he gave it to me. And he told us to get out of here, just move away from River Clare. So that was in 1982, and then later down in the month, when Andre and Ras Leroy came up and told me that they heard police had shot me in the hills, I decided to go down to town, and then I went by water to know what went on, and then from there I went to Olin Bully's home, because Olin Bully lived on Hillsborough Street, he and his wife, and I explained to him if he could put an announcement on the radio to say that I am not dead, police have not shot me, I'm alive and well. And he did that. The Culture Division, he paid for it and he did that. And that was history. But as time went on throughout the year, when I went to Ben's to visit my father, and I went there more than once, I think in 1982, because the first time I went there, my father and I were talking and he would tell me about Bob Marley. Told me that the reason why Bob Marley is successful is not because he has dreadlocks, it's because of who he is. And he told me that if you want to be famous, you have to be aware of the bullet. And next thing he did, he read the entire publication, Honourable Natty Dread, from cover to cover, aloud, in my presence. Anyhow, on this occasion when I went to Ben's, my grandmother just tell me, cut that. And I just told her, come and cut it. Because I realized that when certain things are in motion, when you know the situation in Dominica, and you're trapped, you're out there in the bush, you don't have anything, the only thing you have is the breastplate of righteousness, the shoes of peace. And I didn't really make a decision. The decision was made for me, as all my decisions. When I told her to come and cut it, it was almost like it was another person. Anyhow, she took her scissors and she cut my dreadlocks. And then I tried to burn it, and I tried to get rid of it, burn it. But it couldn't burn, so I buried it under the kitchen in bed, where we stayed. And then I went back to Roseau. And Brethren could not believe that I had just printed a book and here I am ballhead, you know. But I was able to reintegrate back into Bath State and go back up and down to Ben's until my grandma tell me, oh, you keep going to Roseau but you're not looking for a job, you just go smoke marijuana with those friends. And as time would have it, I met a gentleman. I was going to Roseau and I was forming my ride, hitchhiking to Roseau. And I met a man in a I think it was a GP hat or van, tell me he's an agricultural officer and he's looking for some workers to do some service for him in the area. So I told him, yeah, I can do that, and you know, I told him I'm looking for a job, so I told him to come to Roseau or come to meet him at the agricultural division in the Botanic Gardens at a certain time, and he introduced me to the manager there and see what he can do for me. So when I went to the agricultural division department, I met Mr. Harris. He was the chief council officer there at the time. Mr. Harris said, told me, you've gone for a rough time. I told him, yes, sir, I have. He said, well, I can give you a job. It's not much of a job, but then Mr. Horsey burst in. He said, well, I can give him a job because I need some clerks to work on my National Farm Register. So Mr. Harris asked me to join Austria and his team. There were 4 of us, and what we used to do is we used to transcribe the information from the forms that the survey forms that the extension officers brought in, because it was just after Hurricane David, so they was trying to create a national farm register of farm acreages. And this is something I had some experience with, because right after Hurricane David I worked for the Dominica Bananas Association doing a similar job, taking in the enumerator forms and transcribing information. And that was around 79, and it was a marvelous time because I already had my dreadlocks and I had my little tarm, and I used to go to work with my tarm, and it was just, I was the only person, I think, perhaps in Roseau going to work with dreadlocks. So that's just an afterthought. So anyhow, so as I said, going forward, I decided that if I could hold on this job, which lasted for about a year, then maybe I could maybe get integrated into the ministry itself and perhaps carry on. But that was not to be. But I did find a girlfriend, we had a child, and we moved to Gota Village. You know, I used to live at Miss Maud's home. I went back by Miss Maud, and she put me up in one of the rooms. And when I got off my feet, I decided to go and rent. So me and my girlfriend were renting a house in the Gota Village. But then when the job stopped after 1 year, I decided instead of not having any money coming in, best I go back to Ben's. So my auntie, who was in St. Croix, had asked me if I don't mind going to the house and look after the house, because she was going to bring my grandmother up to St. Croix to live with her, so she needed somebody to watch the house. So I decided to move to Ben's again, and that was around 1985, at the end of 85, and I decided to live in Ben's. The odd thing about that is that in 1985 is when I produced my second book of poetry called One Dominica, and that was a book, Odes to I Beloved. It was a book in tribute to Dominica, various aspects of Dominican life. So I'll end here for now, and I hope that